Chapter 1. I should have known Elena would find a way to go north. If I had kept my eyes open, if I had been paying attention at all, I might have seen what she was up to. After all, I had dreamed about crossing La Linea for years. Why should my sister be any different? But it was my 15th birthday, and Elena was the last thing on my mind. I opened one eye and looked down at the wooden crate at the foot of my bed. Abuelita always left something for me to open, and I always knew what would be inside. Calcetines, una camiseta, chones. Something useful, something my grandma could afford, something I needed, something I did not want. But there was nothing, no present, nada. I rubbed my eyes and checked again. No, nothing. Not even the usual pair of underpants this year. Of course, there was never enough money for a gift I did not need. But any small thing would be okay. Cualquier miseria. I rolled over and covered my head with my blanket. What I wanted was a pair of jeans, like the ones I saw Juanito wearing last week. They were not like the pants I wore to work on the rancho every day. The knees patched and darned by Abuelita, frayed on the bottom. The jeans I wanted were bigger and looser and hung low. They got frayed because you let them drag on the ground and you stepped on them on purpose, just because you could, because it didn't matter if they were wore out or not. But what I really wanted could not be wrapped up in a package. It cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and only Papa could give it to me. And he was thousands and thousands of kilometers away. What could I remember about Papa? I thought I could remember sitting on his lap as he read aloud to me, when I was still little enough to sit on his lap. I liked the faint scent of his hair oil, the clove gum he chewed to cover up the cigarettes he smoked behind my mother's back. I liked the slow, careful way he pronounced each word and how his mustache curved up when he read a line he enjoyed. Abuelita made sure I did not forget the important things about Papa. Every chance she got, she told the story of how he educated himself. He went to school only to the 4th grade, and after that, the government chose La Primaria in San Jacinto. He had to work on Abuelo's rancho anyway to help the family. He herded the goats and watered the corn with a book in one hand, and still he did more work than anyone else, Abuelita always said. In those days, Papa could save a peso here and there. He used the money to buy books. The few he had, he read over and over until he knew long passages by heart. I was the firstborn, so Papa should have named me Domingo, after himself, and Abuelo, and Bisabuelo, and Tatarabuelo, and all the Cervantes as far back as anyone could remember. But Papa declared I would not be like him, starting with his name. Miguel Carlos Octavio Pablo de Cervantes, he named me, after the authors he admired. Those were his saints. Those were the names I got. And Papa proclaimed I would get an education. I would have a good, important job, one where I did not have to break my back to put a few frijoles y tortillas on the table. No quiero que sufras como yo. That's how Papa put it. I leaned over the side of my bed to pick up the pants I had left on the floor the night before. On top of them lay a plain white envelope. Well, at least I got a card, I sighed. Abuelita loved me. She wished she could give me more. This year there had been no money at all. It was not her fault. But there was no card inside. No feliz cumpleaños nieto. Instead, there was just a small folded note. It has been 6 years, 11 months, and 12 days since I left to go north across La Linea. It is time for you to come. Go see Don Clemente. He will help you. It was signed simply Papa. Papa had never written a note before. He had never asked me to see Don Clemente before, and I did not know until then that he had counted each day since he left, that he numbered them one by one, just the way I did. I had been waiting for this moment ever since I was 8 years old. Could it be true this time? Finally? For once, I did not care about a birthday present. If Papa's note was true, my real life was finally beginning. This was day number 1. Chapter 2. I picked up my soccer ball and twirled it on my index finger. It was scuffed and stained, and the plastic insides bulged out in 2 places. Soccer was just a memory now. I had not made the cut for the best team, the one I had to get on if I wanted a chance to turn pro. I remembered El Sueño I'd had just before waking. I knew the dream by heart. It was the same one I had had 1,000 times. In my dream, when my turn came, I didn't go north to California. Instead, I played soccer for Cruz Azul or Chivas, America or Necaxa. I was famous. I was very, very rich. I returned to San Jacinto in a shiny new black SUV, riding up high, around and around La Plaza, looking down on the people. They looked back up at me, but they had no eyes, no noses, no mouths. I did not know who anyone was. I brought Mama, Papa, and the twins back home. I built us a mansion, the biggest one in the whole state, 10 times the size of Don Clemente's mansion. I always woke up in a cold sweat just as I put the key in the door. I shook my head hard. Soccer was just a dream now, and a dead one. Ya basta olvidalo. I heard Abuelito shuffling around our little kitchen. She had been up before 5 o'clock a.m. and had already stoked the fire for breakfast. She talked quietly to herself as she moved about. Ahora las tortillas. How many will Miguel want? Abuelita mumbled. The masa slapped softly in her hands. And Elena, sabre Dios. I looked over at my sister. She slept, curled up in a little ball, exhausted. Every night that she could not sleep, like last night, like most nights, Elena pulled Mama's letters out of a little woven bag she kept under her bed. She read them over and over, one by one, in chronological order. In almost 7 years, we had seen Mama just once, a little over 3 years ago, for 3 days. She had slipped home for her sister's Tia Consuelo's funeral, using up all of the saved money to pay a coyote to get her back across La Linea. Elena had to grow up without a mother, so she hoarded what she could of Mama, her letters. The words were like little drops of water to a person dying of thirst. Enough to give hope, not enough to make a difference. I threw on my pants and shirt and tucked Papa's note in my pocket and stepped quietly out of our room. Abuelita stood at the stove, spooning my birthday pozole into a bowl. I kissed her on top of her head. She touched my cheek and made the sign of the cross on my forehead. Abuelita set the bowl on the table. Eat, Miguel, eat. I took a handful of oregano out of a bowl, rubbed it in my palms, and watched it land on top of the steaming soup. Abuelita gave me 2 of her handmade tortillas. I tore one and dipped it into the pozole. The pungent maize mingled with the smell of roasting chiles and the beginnings of sopa. One of our chickens had already been killed for dinner. Abuelita plucked the feathers from its lifeless body. She turned her back to me. Don Clemente has gone to La Capital, she said quietly. He won't be back until Sunday. I'll tell Elena the news if you want, Abuelita continued, but it is better coming from you. She deserves to hear it from you. Si, Abuelita. I said it respectfully. I sounded obedient. I didn't want to be the one to tell Elena. She'd have one of her famous temper tantrums. She would cry for hours. Nothing I could say would stop it, except to say I would take her with me. And that was not going to happen. Ten minutes later, Elena dragged herself out of bed and into the kitchen. She rubbed her eyes and yawned. She looked like she was 3 years old instead of 13. I could not tell her. The words I needed to say felt like mud in my mouth. Abuelita let out a deep sigh, turned her back to me, and stirred the frijoles, bubbling in the pot on the stove. I walked out barefoot and stood at the edge of our ranchito. I dug my toes into the soft, dusty dirt and stared out at the cornfield. The stalks were dry, the cobs stunted and diseased. Every year, the drought got worse. We tried diverting the spring water. We had carried water by hand. Nothing worked. And even if our corn did not die because of the drought, even if the corn grew tall and green with silky golden tassels, we could not sell it for more than a few pesos. Mexico was flooded with cheap foreign corn. Our market had dried up along with el maíz. If Papa and Mama did not send a little money every month, we would starve. Even if I wanted to, I could not help here anymore. Chapter 3. Every year on my birthday, Chewy, Lalo, and I went to the waterfall to swim. Gracias a Dios for my friends. I had to wait days for Don Clemente, and I would go crazy if I had to stay at home. Halfway up the path that led into the hills, Chewy and Lalo sat lounging under the shade of the big tree. Apurate, said Chewy. He jumped up, pocketing the carving he was working on. You're late! Most of the springs had dried up, but we knew one secret place, far back in the hills and higher up. We climbed and climbed until we came to the narrow crevice in the cliff we had discovered years before. We squeezed our bodies through and into the small gorge. Our little waterfall had dwindled to a trickle, but the pool was there. It was not deep enough to dive into, so we stripped down to our underwear and floated in the clear blue water. Remember that time up here when we practiced farting? Chewy asked. He stood up and demonstrated once, just to show he could still do it. I laughed. Yeah, we tortured Moreno real good. He never caught us either. Our farts were quiet but deadly. Senor Moreno was our 5th grade teacher. We had hated him because he smelled like old onions and picked on Chewy for no good reason. We figured the pedos were at least self-defense against Moreno's bad breath. Y el año pasado, I pointed at mi amigo. Tú, Lalo, You got all that tequila and beer and dared us to drink it. Man, I thought I would never quit throwing up." Lalo did not say anything. He just smiled. He knew I was not mad. Up here, we felt hidden from the world. Here, we tried everything first, just to be able to say we did it. I pulled myself out of the water and retrieved the 3 cigarettes I had sneaked from Tio Esteban's stash. We lit up. Chewy and I coughed. Lalo inhaled once or twice and blew the smoke out expertly, like he smoked a pack a day, and then ground the cigarette out on a flat gray rock. Lalo dipped his head into the water. When he came up for air, he shook his dark, thick hair like a dog, spraying water all over the 3 of us. "Me voy," he said matter-of-factly. "I'm going to La Capital. My aunt knows the director of a good preparatoria there. I can get in and live with her," said Lalo. I was not surprised Lalo was finally getting out. He wanted to be a doctor, and he could not do that in San Jacinto. He always said he would go. Lalo did not belong in San Jacinto any more than I did. If he was really leaving, maybe that meant I would really go too. We let the sun dry us for a long time, taking in Lalo's news. "Good," Chewy said finally. "Good. Ye no seas borro. Don't quit." I didn't say anything else. We all knew Chewy wasn't going anywhere. All of a sudden, he leaped to his feet. He pulled his wiry frame up the toeholds in the rock at the side of the gorge until he finally reached the top, then motioned for us to follow. The 3 of us sat cross-legged, gazing down at the valley below. The roofs of San Jacinto glinted in the sun. Smoke curled up from the ranchos. Chewy pointed to the east, to 2 figures in an empty field, one atop a small tractor, the other walking behind. It was Chewy's father and his older brother, Everardo. They'd vowed not to give up on San Jacinto. Chewy's father had formed a group to try to attract tourists. His mother even had some crazy idea about selling her Indígena weaving to the Norte Americanos who came. I didn't know why anyone would want to visit San Jacinto. Chewy knew he was part of his father's big scheme. He seemed resigned to the plan. "Mira!" Chewy pulled his carving out of his pocket. It was one of his fantastical, mythical animal creations. This one had horns, claws, fangs, and wings, painted in a dozen brilliant colors. Despite its scary looks, the creature seemed good and kind, like a little boy playing with a toy. Chewy lifted the figure up and made it fly through the air. I imagined it life-size, carrying me through the sky to the north, across La Linea, to California. "I'm going too," I said suddenly. "I got a letter from Papa. I am going soon." Twice before, Papa had announced it was time for me to follow him north. Both times I had told Chewy and Lalo that I was going, for sure. In the end, there was not enough money. Both times I had had to admit Papa's failure to make good on his promises. Chewy and Lalo looked at each other, not at me. Chewy started laughing. Lalo punched my arm playfully. He shook his head in disbelief, scrambled to his feet, and pointed down towards San Jacinto. "Ay, Miguel," Lalo teased. "No te enjanes. You'll grow old and die here, along with all of the other viejitos." I couldn't say anything back to Lalo. Maybe he was right. Papa had let me down before. It could happen again. Half the time, I was not even sure if he wanted me with him in California. Wouldn't a father sacrifice whatever it took to bring his only son to his side? If he missed me, really missed me, wouldn't he have come for me himself a long time ago?